Editor's note. So Chapter 5 just got announced for June 24th, which as of me recording this is in less than 2 weeks. And I know I've had 8 months to do this video, but I am just a slow editor, and it's going to take me way too long. I'm rushing this video out. I know it's been overdue. I haven't worked. I know I should have been working on this sooner, and I wasn't. I was procrastinating. I'll admit it. I'm sorry. Okay. So editing is going to be very simple. I'm sorry to all of you who were expecting the same level of quality as last time. I couldn't manage it for this time around. I'm sorry. In my last theory video, I made the claim that capsules... Okay, hold on. Why were so many people confused about the term capsule last time? I literally explained it in the video, guys. Okay, let's go over it again. Listen up. Deltarune talks about souls in two different contexts. One is clearly meaning a more metaphysical or spiritual/religious soul, hence little soul, and the other context is supposedly the type of souls like seen in Undertale, which is almost always fully capitalized. Hence, capsule, capital soul. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Keep that in mind. So, my point last time was that capsules, souls, as we know them from Undertale, do not exist in the world of Deltarune. My argument was based on the themes that have so far been presented in Deltarune's story, the parallels therein to Undertale, textual evidence in Deltarune showing that characters either have no knowledge of capsules or don't associate the term soul with the same things that we players do, and that, in all likelihood, the only soul we've ever seen in-game is a unique entity, such that it can be said that souls don't exist in Deltarune. It's probably just us. Broadly, I still stand by this thesis, but in this video, I'm going to revise a few points and address some counter-arguments, and generally strengthen my case for why I believe more than ever that no souls is still the case, with only light use of semantics. So firstly, let me address the counter-arguments. A point I argued in the original video was an argument from silence, specifically on how few materials there are in the light and dark worlds that mention capsules, which was to say there really isn't a lot. Especially when we consider that in Undertale, they're dropping the S-word in almost every major conflict dialogue and exposition room in the game. What we get in Deltarune by comparison is paltry at best. A few ambiguous references in the Labrarbe, some vague lines and fights, that's it. The counter-observation a lot of people made to this point was that it made sense for the world of Deltarune to not know very much about capsules, because the monster-human war never happened. In Undertale, the whole reason that capsules were such a huge focus was because of their necessity as the MacGuffin to break the barrier. That's why Alphys did all the research on souls, and why each conflict was about the souls, etc. You get the point. Only there's one gaping hole in this hypothesis. If you believe that the worlds of Deltarune and Undertale are alternate timelines, which is problematic in itself, but that's neither here nor there, and you believe that the difference between them is that the monster-human war happened in one and not the other, please explain to me how in two worlds that are otherwise exactly the same conflict doesn't occur. Is Deltarune just a world of like flowers and rainbows where nobody wanted to fight over the nuclear threat that capsules potentially are? Isn't there an explanation that makes more sense? Like, if the monster-human war was literally fought over soul power, under what hypothesis would we expect to see such a conflict never occur? Think about it. If capsules never existed, at least as they do in Undertale, there never would have been a reason for humans and monsters to have a conflict in the first place. And obviously there would be no True Lab-esque research. Some people genuinely try to argue that capsules could still exist, but people just don't research them because there's no problem like the barrier that needs solving, and just, what? Yes, problems breed innovation, but sometimes people just innovate for the sake of it. If capsules exist in Deltarune as they do in Undertale, then yes, there are applications for them. Like, I don't know, literally controlling the world? We know what the allure of power does to people. Look at our real-life elites. You think Peter Thiel wouldn't want soul power? Okay, but seriously, guys, the hypothesis that is simplest and has the most explanatory power is often most likely to be true. Occam's razor. The monster-human war never happened, and soul power/determination is relatively unknown in Deltarune because capsules, as we know them from Undertale, don't exist. It's that simple. So what about all the times that characters in the game do mention capsules, like in the Spapton Neo fight or in the fight against Jackenstein? Clearly the game is lampshading the fact that the characters do possess their own unique capsules. This is a pretty big... Why did I give the audience an accent? I don't... Okay. This is a pretty big point. This is a pretty big point of contention, so let's talk about it because I did miss these when scripting my first video. I'm going to make a concession on this point. And considering how bold my first video was, this is probably a considerable step back, but I'm willing to concede that there is potential for the non-player characters in Deltarune to possess souls. But I still don't think that a soul belonging to any non-player character will be a capsule like the ones in Undertale. I think that it's still likely that the player's capsule is an entirely unique entity within Deltarune. Why, you may ask? Let's analyze the Jackenstein fight, where we get a very, very interesting line from the fight narration. I feel like I'm hearing the ghost theme a little bit. Just a tad bit. Okay, we got... Oh! That's cheating! You're taking too long. That's cheating! Okay, you little jerk. That's not really fair. The atmosphere feels tense. You can use Unleash. I can. Unleash. Fight. Chris's soul emitted bright light. Woo! As you can see, whether intentional or not, the game says that Chris's soul shined brilliantly instead of saying your soul. If any of you have seen Andrew Cunningham's video on Narrakara, I'm sure that the concept of Toby Fox himself being the narrator of Undertale isn't an alien concept to you, and personally I do subscribe to that idea. It just seems to make the most sense once we gather all the data, and I'm gonna apply that to Deltarune as well, meaning that the in-game narration is not infallible. It's Toby doing his best, and sometimes Toby can overlook a mistake he makes. Personally, I think this flavor text and others where the capitalization of soul varies could just be chalked up to Toby not being consistent. Well, how can you just assert that with no evidence? I hear you still saying with your accent. Why am I... And I agree. If I was just trying to hand wave this text away by saying, duh, well, Toby kind of forgot, I'd think it was a pretty lame response too. But, my dear viewer, I do have some evidence. I present Exhibit A. Come on. Unleash. Your soul emitted a brilliant light. Toby! What does this mean? So while I confess that this text doesn't outright prove that Toby made a mistake, I think that if it is an intentional contradiction, it's an interesting one. It still wouldn't prove the thesis from my original video, but it does prove something incredibly substantial. Namely, that if we were to take both lines from both fights as being true at the same time, that there is some kind of distinction between our soul and Chris's potential soul. Chris's soul can shine in the Jackenstein fight, but during the Titan battle, our soul is the one using the light power, not the literal lightner for some reason. I think that this flavor text, while maybe ambiguous, if intentional by Toby, all but confirms that the player soul is a unique entity within Deltarune. This would also suggest that the reason Spamton was specifically seeking Chris out to steal soul power was because Chris is the only one with the power of the light, thanks to our possession of them. So, what do we have next? People in the comments really honed in on this one, and somewhat to my surprise, it was a pretty contentious topic. The little rabbit child and the Skelebros. Now, from all my comment reading, it seemed like there were generally 3 streams of thought regarding the rabbit child dialogue. 1. Rabbit child is correct because skeletons are genuinely an anomaly. 2. Rabbit child is correct and simply unfamiliar with the new skeletons. 3. Rabbit child is ignorant and skeletons are genuinely an anomaly. So let's break down the logic of each perspective. Firstly, Rabbit Child is correct about only humans being made of bones, and skeletons make no sense, because where do they come from if they're human skeletons? While I think that bringing up the oddness of human skeleton monsters existing is fair, if we want to say that it's impossible for them to exist, it does seem to then logically entail that Sans, and potentially Papyrus, if he's even in the game, not only aren't native to Undertale, but are also foreign to Deltarune. Sans' nest! Now, could that actually be a wildly out there prediction that turns out to be true? Sure, but from all the hints we have besides the Skelebros being new to hometown, I think it might overcomplicate our current speculations. Sans is tied to Deltarune because of the place where it rained. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna believe that it means Sans is from Deltarune and not some AU traveler who fell in love with Deltarune Toriel. So if skeletons aren't actually exotic or anomalous and just exist by virtue of Deltarune's monster physiology logic, this is simply Rabbit Child contradicting himself and revealing his hand as an unreliable perspective. Second stance. Rabbit Child is correct about humans exclusively being made of bone, and actually just asking about where the Skelebros moved to hometown from, not their literal physiological origins. This one I take issue with because it really needs to ham-fist the plain reading of the dialogue. There is clearly a logic that his little rabbit mind is following, namely that if humans are made of bone, how is it possible that monsters made from bones, which in his mind come from humans, exist? Which on his part is a totally valid question, because in any case, genuinely, how is it possible for these guys to exist, bro? Like what? If I keep thinking about this, it's just gonna get weirder, so I'm just gonna move on. The point is, he isn't stopping in the middle of questioning Chris's physiology to wonder about where his neighbors are from. That's just a bad reading. He's questioning the origins of such implausible monsters. Third stance. You're right, Rabbit Child doesn't know what he's talking about, but also, what is the deal with the skeletons? How can they possibly exist? Toby! Toby, how? Toby! Ah! Honestly, out of all the things I overlooked in my original video, this one might be one of the most interesting. I was so fixated on proving that monsters are biological that I didn't even stop to think about how weird it was that sands and potentially papyrus are literal human skeletons, at least from what the pixel art allows us to discern. And now that I've gone and opened this can of worms, I can't help but think it might go way further than we all think, and that's why I'm demanding that Toby releases the rabbit files! Okay, but seriously, if we want to work this into my hypothesis about monsters being biological in nature rather than magical, I think we can just chalk it up to convergent evolution and call it a day. Maybe human skeletons are the true optimal biological form? Suck it, crabs. I'm honestly not sure what to think about this anymore, so please let me know what you think in the comments. This next point is continuing on the biological monster train, and it's about a character I completely overlooked in my first video, and honestly I'm embarrassed I forgot him, because like, literally how? Napstablook, the literal ghost monster in Hometown, and everyone knows ghosts aren't physical. So I admit that missing this was a total failure on my part, and I apologize, but I do want to note that so far in Deltarune, Napstablook has done nothing remotely ghostly besides appearing to float around to move. Which, I mean, let's be honest, I don't think anyone would want to see Blookie with the walking animation, but this is in sharp contrast to when we meet Napstablook in Undertale, where he vanishes multiple times and appears and disappears depending on how close the player is. In Deltarune, meanwhile, Napstablook can escape from the car, running him over. He doesn't phase through any solid walls and doesn't vanish into thin air when finished talking. While that's not conclusive, I do think that these details are worth noting and potential evidence that Napstablook in Deltarune is biological in some way, until conclusively proven otherwise. Moving on to the Susie-colored elephant in the room, another proposed solution to Susie bleeding is the monster-human hybrid theory. Since the anniversary stream, where we got to see a version of Undertale that doesn't actually exist, we got a surprising amount of extra lore. In this case, solely one character's dialogue has managed to convince an entire group of people that it is possible for humans and monsters to crossbreed. Gerson Boone. In this exclusive dialogue, Gerson explains that before the monster-human war, interspecies couples existed who opposed the war, but in the end, their protests were in vain, as all the couples were split when monsters were sealed underground. People have been using this text to speculate that these couples had hybrid children, and thus it's conceivable that Susie bleeds in Chapter 4 because she's an example of one of these hybrids. I think this is dumb for a few reasons. Like, firstly, Gerson never says that these couples had children, and when he talks about the couples splitting up due to the war, he never mentions children being left behind, only that the couples split. I think it's fairly clear that this dialogue is unambiguously leaving no room for the idea of crossbred children. Also, we can just point to the real-life logic of how impossible it is for different species to create children together. And that's just in the framework of my biological monster hypothesis. God help you on that theory if you're working from the standpoint that monsters are still magic in Deltarune. So like a magic monster and a biological human can make kids? Okay, I guess, bro. I don't think that this dialogue adds any support to the Susie hybrid theory in the slightest, and I wish people would stop reading their assumptions into text whenever something new is revealed. Anyway, let's shift over focus to Chris a little bit now, because there are plenty of oddities to discuss when it comes to souls and this character. Like, for instance, the whole matter of Chris needing a soul for something, according to the kitchen phone call. A lot of people let me know in the comments that the Japanese localization actually gives us a big hint as to what Chris needs the soul to do, and it's not to close the dark fountains, it's to enter the dark fountains. So if that ends up being more fully revealed or expanded on, I have no idea what that could mean for this theory. There are just so many variables in it all. I think we need to dig into the themes of darkness and light again in order to figure out what that could mean, but I think I want to save that for a different video because some people got annoyed at how much time I spent building my thematic case last time. So like, scenario A, Chris can't enter dark fountains without a soul, isn't actually the complete thought in the phone call, and we're being misled by half-finished dialogue. Maybe the full line would clarify that Chris needs the soul to be able to accomplish a specific task, not just entering the dark worlds. Scenario B, Chris really just can't enter dark worlds without the soul, because possessing a soul is a prerequisite for humans to enter a dark world. If that's the case, then do monsters not need a soul? Because all the monsters in the game can seemingly enter and leave fountains as they please, unless it means monsters do actually have souls and are just completely ignorant of that for some reason. Scenario C. Chris can't enter the Dark Worlds without the soul, but it has nothing to do with Deltarune's metaphysics and is simply for some other reason, like Chris not having the drive to enter a Dark World themselves, and they need the player to force them. After all, they do only ever remove the soul in the Light World. Again, with the line being unfinished, it gives us a lot of room to speculate, and until we get solid answers, I think this one is just going to be an enigma. Another thing that's easy to take for granted is the very fact that Chris has the knowledge and ability to remove the soul from the body seemingly at will. Not to mention the cage they have in their room, as if they've done this before. My crackpot theory in this is that when Chris and Caddy summoned a demon as kids, that they actually summoned Kara! That they actually summoned maybe like another soul, or like Gaster. His numeric calling card is like 666, a number typically associated with Satan and Christianity, so like, let's call that a maybe? No, but really, if it's true that Chris summoned a demon and studied the occult as a kid with Caddy, like what made them stop? Why did they seemingly drift apart from Caddy? Did it have something to do with Dessa's disappearance? I have no idea. But I think that it's worth considering to think that perhaps Chris had experience with soul possession before we came along. They just seem way too comfortable and nonchalant about this whole thing, despite their autonomy literally being randomly stripped from them one morning as they woke up. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like I'd be a bit more panicked and freaked out than hungry for pie after removing the demon that possessed me for a day. Anyway, that's my crack theory. Listen, I know I said earlier I was going to spare you for more thematic analysis in this video, but there is one topic I wanted to briefly address, and that's the argument I made about determinism being one of the core pillars of Deltarune's themes. One commenter pushed back really strongly, and I think they kind of missed the point I was actually trying to make. I mean, maybe I didn't communicate it well, so let me just rehash that. I was not trying to say that Deltarune is necessarily anti-deterministic. I said that Undertale and Deltarune pushed back against a deterministic outlook on life. That is to say that Deltarune isn't about free will versus no free will. It's about how you interact with the world that ultimately cannot be changed. More so in Deltarune than Undertale, obviously. For instance, people who believe in determinism and believe that they have no free will generally still behave as expected in daily life. I think they would likely chalk that up to being an example of just how convincing the illusion of free will is, but it's interesting to note. Though to be fair, I have heard of a study where different groups with different beliefs on free will were required to take a test where they had the option to cheat on that test, and the people who believed they had no free will were actually more likely to cheat than the people who believed they had free will. My brain can't wrap around what the implications of that is. Like, that's literally statistically people who don't believe in free will are more likely to take like a quote unquote like unethical route to achieve a goal. But I mean, take that how you will. But looking at that example, I definitely see how it could be easy for someone who believes they have no free will to start living their life radically differently. Almost like if life were a video game. That's why I drew parallels with Flowey when I talked about determinism in relation to these games. He is literally the example of someone who believes that all of his reality is predictable, unchangeable, and ultimately pointless. Regardless of if Flowey is wrong to have that outlook, it certainly changes how he interacts with the world of Undertale, to the point where when we meet him in the game, he's a total monster. This kind of attitude, I think, is what Undertale and Deltarune are trying to inoculate the player against, especially so in Deltarune with how much emphasis Toby is putting on the journey and not the destination or ending. Assuming Deltarune really only has one ending, it's likely going to be everything around the ending that changes depending on how we play the game. Do we treat the world of Deltarune and the characters in it like it's utterly pointless and meaningless, or do we interact with the world in a way that believes that there is value in the story being told and in the connections we make on the way to the ultimate destination? Are we making bonds, or are we severing them forever? Okay. Rant over. I hope that clears things up for everyone who is confused on that point. That's my thematic analysis portion for this video done. Chapter 5 will soon be upon us, so I really wanted to get this video out before that. I'm really excited for what Toby's cooking up, even if it ends up taking this theory out back, and I'm sure all you guys are too. You know what? For the end of the video, I'm going to do some rapid fire, like quick predictions I have for Chapter 5, so let's see if they end up aging like milk or not. Firstly, since we already had a near encounter between the characters in-game and the soul in Chapter 4, I'm betting that we're gonna get a full, like, diegetic introduction to the Fun Gang in Chapter 5. On all your souls, it's gonna happen. Second, I think we're gonna meet Device Friend in Chapter 5. I don't know what that encounter will be like or how it'll go down, but I think we're finally gonna have a real appearance from him. And, like, not just, like, it shows up in the shadows at the edge of the screen, but, like, we're actually gonna, like, interact with it. Third, I feel like something is gonna happen with Rudy. I don't know what. I don't know why. I just think something crazy with his illness might happen. That's purely on vibes. Fourth, I think Hometown has secret tunnels. The Holiday House basement plays the shelter sounds. People keep arguing about the logistics of like Carol / the Knight moving around Hometown so quickly without being seen. And I bet I bet it's because the shelter is somehow connected to Carol's basement, and I bet we're gonna find the tunnels. Fifthly, I think Chapter 5 will either be the last time we have a semi-regular chapter structure, or it'll be a complete upset to the status quo like Chapter 4 was, but like even more wild, especially for the weird route. Like the weird route's gonna take off in Chapter 5, I bet. Sixth, the knight will be unmasked. This is purely a prediction for the vibes. Honestly, I mean, a lot of these are probably just vibes based, but that's because that's generally how I operate. Purely on vibes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe for more and all that stuff. If you hated it, make sure to let me know in the comments for more engagement. Much appreciated. Love ya. That'll be all from me. Sorry this video took so long to release. I'm just not good at being consistent with scripting and recording voiceover and editing. Love God, love others. Goodbye!